Today, we're pulling back the curtain on airport security and exposing the things TSA hopes you never learn. Some of these are going to make you rethink what actually happens every time you walk through that checkpoint, so stick with us to the end because the last one might be the most unsettling of all. First up, TSA agents have way less authority than most people assume. Their entire job is spotting threats to the aircraft, the crew, and everyone on board. They are not drug enforcement, and they cannot slap handcuffs on you. So, if an officer digs through your bag and finds something sketchy that isn't actually a security risk, all they can legally do is call in local police and step back, and let the professionals handle it from there. Here's something else almost nobody realizes. You have far more rights at that checkpoint than you think, and knowing them can completely change how a stressful screening plays out. Filming or photographing officers in the screening area is completely legal, as long as you're not blocking the process or capturing sensitive equipment. And anytime an agent asks you to do something you're uneasy about, like unlocking your phone, just ask one simple question. Is this actually required by law? The answer might genuinely surprise you, and it did for me the first time I asked. Agents can absolutely ask you to power on a device to prove it works, but they cannot force you to unlock it or hand over your texts, photos, or files. Your passport never has to sit in a plastic bin either. You're allowed to keep it in your hand as you walk through the scanner. And if the full-body scanner makes you uncomfortable, you can opt for a pat-down instead, request a private room, ask for an officer of your own gender, bring a witness, and even insist they put on a clean pair of gloves first. Most travelers go their whole lives never using a single one of these options, simply because nobody ever tells them they exist. Quick pause. If any of this is catching you off guard, that's exactly why it's worth sticking around, because it only gets wilder from here. Drop a comment on how you personally feel stepping into that scanner. I'll admit it doesn't bother me now, but ask me the same question 15 years ago and you'd get a very different answer. And hey, tapping subscribe costs nothing, and genuinely helps more travelers stumble onto this kind of information, so if you're finding this useful, that's the easiest way to say thanks. Secret number 3, and this one is genuinely wild once you know the backstory. The machine you walk through today isn't the same technology TSA used 10 years back. Those original units were called Backscatter X-ray scanners, and they produced an almost photorealistic image of your naked silhouette underneath your clothing. A full outline of your actual body captured in detail most people would never willingly agree to. People started calling them a digital strip search, and that label wasn't far off. Nobody could tell you exactly who was viewing that image, how long they kept it, or what happened to it afterward. Investigations later confirmed officers had actually saved and passed around scans of travelers, which is exactly the kind of privacy nightmare that makes your stomach turn. Lawmakers eventually intervened, and by 2013, every single backscatter machine was pulled from every airport in the country and replaced with the outline-based scanners you see now, the ones that just throw up a generic cartoon figure and flag a specific zone if something seems off. No more detailed silhouette required. Another program got shut down once the public caught wind of it, and honestly, this might be the most disturbing entry on the whole list. A surveillance initiative called Quiet Skies. It secretly placed everyday travelers under watch by undercover air marshals during flights without those travelers ever knowing they'd been singled out. Those marshals would sit close to their target and log everything: bathroom trips, fidgeting, even blink rate, all typed up into formal reports as though the passenger were under criminal investigation. These weren't suspected criminals or terror suspects, just regular passengers an algorithm decided to flag, often for reasons that were never disclosed to anyone, including the passengers themselves. The program finally got scrapped in 2025, after reporting revealed it had tracked political figures like Tulsi Gabbard, while at the very same time, a sitting senator's spouse had quietly been placed on a list that let him skip screening entirely, which tells you a lot about how selectively these systems actually get applied. On top of that, the whole operation burned through more than $200 million a year of taxpayer money, and never once led to catching an actual terrorist. And unfortunately, those aren't the only uncomfortable stories to leak out. For years, more than 18,000 current and former TSA staff were part of a private Facebook group running under the radar. When reporters finally got inside, they found members mocking travelers' appearances and sharing posts that were racist, violent, and far worse than anything you'd expect from people sworn to protect the public. That group has since been taken down, but the sheer size and duration of it is genuinely unsettling to think about. Here's where it gets even more unnerving, because unlike the last two, this next program is still active right now, today, at the airport you'll fly out of next. TSA has poured over $1.5 billion into training officers for something called SPOT, short for Screening of Passengers by Observation Techniques. These specially trained agents scan the checkpoint line watching for supposedly suspicious behavior, avoiding eye contact, sweating, even the way your throat moves when you swallow. When researchers finally obtained the full list of more than 90 flagged behaviors, they found that nearly every single one of them was just normal human nervousness, blinking too much, showing up late, fidgeting because you're worried about missing your flight. Completely ordinary traveler behavior treated as a potential red flag by a system that cost taxpayers a fortune to build. Which brings us to those four dreaded letters, SSS, or Secondary Security Screening Selection. If you've ever spotted that code printed on your boarding pass, you already know it means a much longer process at the checkpoint. TSA insists selection is random, and sometimes it genuinely is. But certain actions can quietly trigger it too, like paying for your ticket in cash, booking a last-minute international flight, or having a mismatch somewhere in your ID details. If you keep getting flagged over and over, it might be worth thinking about what you have in common each time. I've personally been hit with this code more than once, and every time it meant a pat-down, an explosive swab test, a full search of my bags, and a round of questions about my trip and my job. Now here's one that catches almost every traveler off guard, because most people assume their checked luggage disappears into some kind of black box the moment it's handed over at the counter. In reality, checked bags go through the exact same scanning process as your carry-on. If something on that scan looks off, they will open your suitcase. Except this time, you're not standing there watching it happen. TSA pushes travelers toward using TSA-Approved locks, the ones stamped with a small padlock-shaped logo that officers can open with a master key instead of cutting it off. What they conveniently leave out is that those master keys were photographed, leaked online, and copied years ago. A full set is sitting on Amazon right now for less than $10. So technically, anyone who wants into your TSA-approved locked bag can order the same keys, open it, take whatever they like, and zip it right back up without a trace. Officers are supposed to leave a note inside if they search your bag, but a corrupt employee or an opportunistic thief obviously isn't going to bother leaving evidence of what they just did. A simple zip tie on your zippers is a smarter move, because at least a cut tie tells you someone got inside. Stick with me here, because this next part finally explains why the rules feel so inconsistent every single time you fly, and it's not just in your head. TSA doesn't always enforce its own guidelines evenly, and a lot comes down to whatever judgment call the individual agent standing in front of you happens to make. Some calls are genuinely subjective, like the traveler stopped because her designer handbag had a tiara-shaped handle that technically resembled brass knuckles, a banned item under TSA rules. The agent's reasoning? It could theoretically be used as a weapon, and honestly, that's not entirely wrong when you look at it closely. That unpredictability is actually built into the system on purpose, specifically to keep anyone who might try to exploit a known pattern guessing. Other times, an agent just isn't familiar with a specific rule, because the list of prohibited and permitted items is enormous, and constantly changing month to month. One traveler in Orlando got stopped over a pickleball paddle, even though TSA's own website explicitly lists paddles as allowed carry-on items. A purse or a paddle getting flagged might sound absurd, but honestly, I'd rather see agents erring on the side of caution given what actually turns up at checkpoints on a regular basis. TSA's own social media recap from last year included everything from a fake pipe bomb replica to live turtles smuggled inside someone's bra at a Miami checkpoint. So what actually happens to everything that gets confiscated or left behind? This next part might genuinely surprise you, and it's easily one of the wilder facts on this entire list. Seized items get handed over to the state where the airport sits, and from there, the vast majority get resold through government surplus platforms and public auction sites. There's even a real brick-and-mortar shop that specializes entirely in reselling items lost or confiscated at airports, stocked wall-to-wall with knives, power tools, laptops, jewelry, and sporting gear that used to belong to travelers just like you. If TSA took it off you, there's a real chance it eventually shows up for sale somewhere with a price tag on it, sitting on a shelf next to somebody else's confiscated pocket knife. If you want to make sure your own gear never ends up on one of those shelves, stick around for the next video, where we break down exactly what TSA is confiscating from carry-ons right now. And if you found any of this useful, give it a like and drop a subscribe. It genuinely helps more travelers find this kind of information before they're already standing in line. See you in the next one.